Herman, thanks so much for your time. Good to catch up with you as always. You're unhappy about what the court has decided and you are seeking to appeal the decision. Tell us why.
Yes, I think first of all, a small correction. The order was actually handed down by the North Gauteng High Court, not by the Constitutional Court. So there were actually two separate judgments handed down today involving CPS. The first was the case with Corruption Watch on the 317 million, and the second was the extension of the current contract. But if we just get back to the first point, we are obviously not happy with the judgment that was delivered. We believe that there are several issues that were not taken into consideration in coming to the judgment that was handed down. And for us, the most important aspects, if I could just share those with you, revolve around the work that was done, the context in which it was done. We entered into a bona fide agreement with Sassa 5 years ago, in terms of which we registered an additional 11 million beneficiaries. So if you recall at the time, there are actually 10.8 million beneficiaries who receive social grants in South Africa today, but there are an additional 11 or 12 million people today. Those are mainly children who are the subjects of these grants. And it is within that population of children and the child support grant that a lot of the fraud endemic to the system takes place. So a decision was made by Sassa after we introduced our biometric verification system that they wanted the entire population of grant recipients registered, including the children, which then enabled us to do a one-to-many search for all fingerprints and for all grant recipients, and so we could eradicate all duplicates and all ghost recipients. This resulted in a saving of more than 2 billion rand per annum to the South African government. And so we feel strongly that the work that we did, and by the way, we only recovered the cost of what it entailed for us to register the additional 11 million people. So there was no profit component. We feel that there was an enormous amount of value added, and the fair value was given to the South African government. And, on that basis, along with a few others, we will be approaching the court to ask for leave to appeal.
I mean, Herman, you say in your statements here that, it is unfortunate that once again NET1 is finding itself prejudiced by the apparent shortcomings in the Saasa process. So who do you think in this situation should have received the blame?
Well, I think a large part of the blame has to be apportioned to the supply chain management process that was followed within the Sassa environment. But having said that, when this process kicked off 6 years ago, it was of a magnitude unlike any other that had been undertaken in the country. We were at one stage enrolling or registering up to 150,000 people a day. And I think, in fairness, there was absolutely no time to go through a 5 or a 6 month separate tender or procurement process, at which time we would have missed the boat entirely to bring in all of the children into the process. So, yes, there are shortcomings, technically with the Sassa procurement process, but I think one also has to take the circumstances at the time into account.
Okay, Herman, so let's talk about that ruling then by the Constitutional Court now, extending the current contract with CPS. So tell us exactly about the terms in which that extension was granted, because I do know one of your arguments prior was that you could not continue paying at the same rate. So did that extension include an amendment to the rate in which you will pay out? Is it the additional 2.8 million grants?
So the amendment specifically, or the extension specifically, deals with the payment of the cash beneficiaries. So those are around 2.5 million beneficiaries, mainly in the rural and the deep rural areas, who we service using mobile ATMs, at roughly 10,000 points of service. The court has given us a mechanism, which is one that we had proposed as part of the proceedings, that we approach National Treasury just after the judgment's handed out, which obviously is today, So we'll be approaching Treasury over the next couple of weeks with all the relevant information regarding the costs of the system, and in collaboration with National Treasury, we will then determine a fair price. And the court has also ruled that Treasury then has to revert back to the court within a short period of time with their recommendation.
I mean, Herman, your share price is illiquid. I mean, a 7% drop in a day is not unusual for NET1, but you're down 26% for the year as it is. I mean, that clearly reflects grave concern from your shareholders regarding what is going on, and the bugbear right now is this social grant situation. Words of comfort from them?
At least we now have the 6-month extension. I think there was a lot of uncertainty around whether the contract would come to an end and what the exact impact of it would be on us. We now know that for the next 6 months at least we will be playing a continuous role. And I think also during the next 6 months we'll be able to give our shareholders a complete update on the group strategy and exactly what the impact will be on the group following the termination of this current extension in September this year.
And there was a ruling that was made earlier on this year as well, saying that NET1, or CPS rather, was not precluded from tendering for the social grants contract here in South Africa in future. Is this something that could be part of your strategy long term?
Yes, the tender was actually advertised and has closed. I think it closed about 2 weeks ago. NET1 put in a tender document, so we are a part of that tender process. That's why we approached the court in the first instance, to make sure that some of the interpretations that were out there held that we were completely precluded from participating in the process. The court made it clear that we did nothing wrong initially, so there was no reason why we should be precluded from continuing in any future tenders. So on that basis, we submitted a tender, and we obviously await the outcome from Sassa in that regard.
I mean, Herman, just a finally parting question. The rhetoric right now in South Africa is one of a new dawn. I mean, you have a new social development minister there in the form of Susan Shivango. Do you expect in future relations with government departments whereby the current president is really trying to, clean up some of the messes that have been caused there? Do you expect in future to not have to deal with the kind of mess regarding social grants that you're dealing with now?
Well, our relationship with Sassa and the Ministry of Social Development has never been easy. I think by the nature of the service that we provide the government, there's always going to be some form of disagreement in some cases in terms of how the service is delivered and what should be done or what could be done. I don't think that going forward it will simply be plain sailing. There's always going to be a little bit of tension between the private sector and government when it comes to large contracts like this specific one. But we certainly look forward to a future where our relations with both Sassa and the ministry improves, and where we all work together for the better good of all the beneficiaries out there.